A single voice could command thousands in an ancient plaza without shouting. Master architects once engineered entire cities to manipulate sound, creating acoustic traps that amplified authority and suppressed all other noise. This video will reveal how these builders of silence used stone and geometry to control crowds, a forgotten art of social domination with startling parallels to our digital world. Why would civilizations invest immense resources to shape silence itself? And how do the echo chambers of ancient plazas mirror the ones we inhabit online today? By the end, you will understand the hidden science of sonic control and how to recognize its influence in your own life. What does it mean to live in a world designed to hear only certain voices? The true genius of these ancient builders lies not in the monuments they left behind, but in the silence they engineered between them. To stand in the center of a vast ceremonial plaza was to be at the heart of a meticulously crafted acoustic instrument. These architects thought in sound waves, using stone and geometry as their tuning keys. They were the first acoustic engineers, and their blueprints were written in the very angles of the walls and the textures of the pavement. Researchers in the field of archaeoacoustics, like David Lubman, have measured these spaces and discovered their secrets. They found that the builders could calculate reverberation, the way sound persists in a space, to make a single voice carry with divine clarity while ordinary chatter was lost. The physics is elegant in its simplicity. A curved wall acts like a parabolic dish, catching sound and reflecting it forward in a focused beam. A flat, hard surface of polished limestone or marble becomes a perfect mirror for sound, bouncing it across great distances. They created what we now call whispering galleries, where a murmur spoken at one end of a curved wall can be heard clearly at the other, a secret channel of communication in plain sight. The most powerful voice was always placed at the focal point of these invisible sound lenses, the spot where all the reflections converge. From that one position, a leader could address thousands without strain, their words amplified by the architecture itself to feel omnipresent, as if emanating from the stones. A stunning example survives at the Mayan city of Chichen Itza. There, a single clap of hands at the base of the massive El Castillo pyramid does not return as a simple echo. It comes back transformed into the chirping cry of the sacred Quetzal bird. This was not an accident. It was acoustic tailoring, bending physics to serve cultural power and spiritual belief. How did they achieve such precision with only ropes, levels, and an intuitive grasp of their materials? Their success hints at a profound and universal human drive, a desire to not just build spaces, but to control the very way we communicate within them. This foundational control over sound set the stage for a far more sophisticated and insidious form of influence, one that went beyond mere amplification. From that single focal point, a ruler's voice would wash over the entire plaza, reaching even the most distant listener with an unnatural and penetrating clarity. In that moment, the speaker was no longer just a person. They became a force of nature, their words seeming to emanate from the stones and the sky itself, a phenomenon that effortlessly fostered an illusion of divine presence and unassailable authority. This was not public speaking, it was acoustic theater, and the stage was designed to make one voice matter above all others. The social implications of this sonic control were profound. These architectural marvels were, in effect, machines for reinforcing social hierarchies. They made the leader's message inescapable, a constant and clear stream of narrative, while the voices of the common people, their murmurs and potential dissent, were lost as acoustic litter, muffled and dispersed by the very same geometry. Consider the Roman Forum, where master orators like Cicero understood the power of their stage. The careful placement of speaking platforms and the reflective surfaces of surrounding basilicas allowed their rhetoric to project with formidable power, shaping public opinion and political outcomes. Contrast this with the chaotic, unengineered spaces of a bustling city market or a crowded side street. In those organic environments, dissent could find its voice. Arguments could be heard, alternative ideas could cross-pollinate, and the official narrative could be challenged by the messy, vibrant noise of the crowd. The engineered plaza eliminated that risk. It was an early, physical echo chamber, not curated by a digital algorithm, but carved from stone. Its architecture acted as a filter, systematically removing disruptive sounds and ensuring only the approved narrative reached the masses in its most potent form. The psychological effects of existing in such a space are startlingly consistent. When a message is delivered with perfect clarity and repetition, unimpeded by competing noise, it begins to bypass critical thinking. It fosters conformity, as the absence of audible alternatives makes the dominant narrative seem like the only reality. This repetitive, emotionally resonant exposure, as seen in the acoustic perfection of ancient Greek theaters, was a powerful tool for social cohesion. The myths of the gods, the laws of the city, the very identity of the culture were not just heard, they were felt, embedded deep into the public consciousness through a flawless sonic experience. So we must ask ourselves, in what ways do our own modern environments create similar effects? How do the curated feeds of social media, or even the design of our urban centers, function to amplify certain voices to an authoritative roar while systematically silencing the messy, dissonant but vital sounds of dissent? Reflecting on these ancient social dynamics reveals a timeless and unsettling link between the control of sound and the architecture of societal order. A whisper can travel further than a shout when the walls themselves are listening. Modern visitors to places like the Hypogeum in Malta often report an uncanny sensation, speaking softly against a cold stone wall only to have their companion, standing dozens of feet away, hear every word with perfect clarity. This is not a ghost story, it is the enduring legacy of ancient acoustic engineering. These whispering walls were not happy accidents, they were meticulously crafted features. The secret lies in a combination of three key elements: concave surfaces that gather and focus sound like a satellite dish, precise angles that dictate exactly where those sound waves will travel, and resonant materials like polished limestone or granite that reflect noise with incredible efficiency instead of absorbing it. Archaeoacoustics researcher Miriam Kohler has extensively studied the Andean site of Chavin de Huantar, a complex that functioned as a massive sonic instrument. There, builders constructed a labyrinth of underground tunnels and ducts. When someone spoke into one of these openings, their voice would be channeled and distorted, emerging elsewhere as a disembodied, roaring echo. This was not for amusement, it was a form of psychological control, using disorienting sound to overwhelm visitors and enhance the authority of the oracle or priest who understood the secret. The engineering principle at work is the law of reflection, the same rule that governs how light bounces off a mirror. These master builders calculated the angles of their walls to create specific reflection paths, directing sound to create acoustic hotspots where a leader's words would be crystal clear, while other areas were left as sonic dead zones, places of muffled confusion for anyone not in the know. They even integrated natural elements into their designs. Strategically placed fountains or water channels provided a constant, masking murmur, drowning out private conversations and ensuring only the amplified, official voice could rise above the background hum. The Roman Coliseum offers another brilliant example. Its vast network of vaulted passageways and stairwells acted as whispering galleries, allowing guards and event coordinators to communicate across the enormous structure without being seen, managing the crowd with an invisible hand. The sheer intentionality behind every stone and angle reveals a deep understanding of human psychology. So, what could modern architects learn from these ancient techniques? Could we design public parks or town squares that foster better community dialogue by ensuring every voice can be heard? Or would we, perhaps unconsciously, recreate systems that funnel attention toward a single, powerful focal point, repeating the patterns of the past? Understanding these whispering walls forces us to see architecture not just as a physical space, but as a conductor of influence, a design that can either invite conversation or command obedience. But the most sophisticated acoustic design is useless without human guardians. In the shadows of these grand plazas, a specialized class of individuals worked to maintain the perfect sonic environment. These were the silence enforcers, the human complement to the stone architecture. In ancient Egypt, temple priests did more than lead rituals, they were acoustic technicians. They used precisely timed chants, the ringing of sistrums, and the deep tolling of bells to dominate the soundscape. Their goal was to fill the air with sanctioned sound, leaving no acoustic space for unwanted noise or dissent. They directed the collective attention of thousands, using sound as an invisible leash. In Mesoamerica, the role was even more direct. Skilled drummers and horn players were strategically positioned at the edges of a crowd. Their synchronized playing did not just provide music, it created a powerful sonic barrier. The wall of sound could physically contain crowd movement, guide processions along predetermined routes, and instantly drown out any disruptive outburst with a wave of overwhelming noise. These enforcers were highly trained. Orators, like those in Rome or Greece, underwent rigorous voice projection exercises, learning to harness the architecture's power from the focal point. They were the living component of the acoustic machine, and the penalties for violating these acoustic norms were severe. In many societies, interrupting a state ceremony with your own voice could result in exile, heavy fines, or worse. This was not just about disrespect, it was about breaking the carefully constructed illusion of unity and divine authority. The entire system, from the stone to the stewards, was designed to make the official narrative feel supernatural and unchallengeable. When a declaration is made from an acoustic hotspot, amplified by the very stones and surrounded by enforced silence, it carries a weight that feels beyond human dispute. So we must ask, who are our modern silence enforcers? Think of the social media algorithms that boost certain voices into your feed while shadow banning others. Consider the security personnel who move through a protest not to engage in debate but to break its acoustic cohesion. These are the new guardians of our soundscapes, shaping what we hear and what is silenced in our public and digital lives. Deep within the Andes, the stones of Chavin to Huantar were designed to speak. A pilgrim would enter its dark, windowless corridors, a labyrinth of granite and shadow, where the very air seemed to vibrate with unseen forces. The ground was damp, the only light a flickering torch flame that cast dancing shapes on walls that whispered back. This was not merely a temple, it was an elaborate acoustic maze, engineered to overwhelm the senses and dismantle a visitor's sense of reality. Stanford University's Archaeoacoustics team, led by Miriam Kohler, has mapped this sonic landscape, revealing how the builders used a network of underground canals and ventilation shafts not just for water and air but for sound. A conch shell trumpet, known as a pututu, blown into one of these stone ducts would not echo normally. Its sound would be channeled, twisted, and then projected from multiple openings at once, creating the terrifying illusion that the walls themselves were roaring. Imagine standing in the circular plaza, a sunken court surrounded by carved monoliths. You whisper a prayer to the jaguar deity, and from a stone gallery high above, a distorted, booming voice seems to answer. This was the core of the psychological control. The priesthood did not need to claim a connection to the gods. The architecture manufactured the proof. The multi-sensory experience was meticulously crafted. The rumble of water through the canals provided a constant, low-frequency hum that vibrated through the stone floor, a physical sensation of power. The distorted echoes created a sense of disorientation, making visitors susceptible to suggestion. The priests, who alone understood the secrets of the labyrinth, could stage-manage these sonic events, making their pronouncements appear as divine interventions. For the pilgrim, the message was undeniable. The gods were real, they were present in the stones, and they spoke only through the appointed intermediaries. This acoustic theater solidified belief and guaranteed compliance far more effectively than any threat of force. It was governance through engineered awe. So what does this ancient Andean temple reveal about our own world? When we encounter a digital environment that constantly confirms our biases, that amplifies certain truths while muting others, are we not modern pilgrims in a new kind of labyrinth? The technology changes, but the human desire to believe what we hear from an authoritative, seemingly supernatural source remains a powerful and perilous constant. The roar of a Roman crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of sound that could either lift a leader to glory or dash him upon the stones of the forum. To step onto the rostra, the raised speaking platform, was to enter an acoustic arena as precise as any modern concert hall. Here, a senator like Cicero did not merely speak, he performed a duet with the architecture itself. The open space of the forum, flanked by the hard, reflective marble facades of the Basilica Julia and the Basilica Aemilia, formed a natural sound bowl. A speaker's voice, projected from that elevated stage, would strike these vast walls and be cast back into the heart of the crowd, reaching listeners far beyond the range of an unaided human shout. The principle was one of focused reflection. The flat, polished surfaces acted like acoustic mirrors, bouncing sound waves forward with minimal distortion, while the raised position of the orator prevented his words from being absorbed by the bodies directly in front of him. Classical writers were acutely aware of this power. Cicero himself wrote extensively on actio, the art of delivery, which included not just voice control and careful enunciation, but a deep understanding of one's placement within a space. He knew that a slight turn of the head, a well-timed pause to let an important point resonate, or a specific gesture could use the environment's reverberation to maximum effect. A political career could literally be made or broken by how well a man harnessed the invisible currents of sound in the forum. The famous speeches of Julius Caesar provide a masterclass in this acoustic authority. When he addressed the people, his words were not lost in a confusing echo. Instead, the architecture clarified and amplified his voice, making his declarations sound inevitable, his logic unassailable. This sonic clarity fostered a powerful sense of unity, making thousands of individuals feel as if they were part of a single conversation with their leader. The management of crowd noise was another engineered feature. The surrounding colonnades and archways channeled the murmur of the multitude, preventing it from becoming a disruptive roar that could drown out the speaker, while simultaneously funneling the orator's voice outward. Every element, from the stone underfoot to the porticos overhead, was co-opted into the service of amplification, so we must consider, where is our modern rostra? The stage of a political rally is meticulously designed, with speaker placement and sound systems calculated to achieve that same feeling of direct, powerful connection. But look closer at the digital spaces we inhabit. The algorithms of social media platforms function like invisible basilicas, reflecting and amplifying certain voices with perfect fidelity while absorbing others into silence. The technology is new, but the goal of turning speech into an instrument of social cohesion and control is as ancient as Rome itself. A sudden, unexpected noise still triggers a primal jolt of alarm, while the steady rhythm of a chant can lull us into a deep calm. These are not just reactions, they are echoes of an ancient psychological vulnerability, one that the builders of silent plazas understood and exploited with masterful precision. The psychological mechanism at work is a form of classical conditioning, the same process that makes a dog salivate at the sound of a bell. In an engineered plaza, the architecture itself was the bell. The repetitive clarity of the leader's voice, amplified by the stones and arriving without competition, became inextricably linked with feelings of awe, unity, and even fear. Over time, just entering that space primed the crowd for submission, conditioning them to accept the amplified message as truth. Modern psychology identifies a related phenomenon called auditory driving, where rhythmic sounds like a steady drumbeat or a droning chant can actually entrain brainwave patterns. The brain's electrical oscillations begin to sync with the external rhythm, which can induce trance-like states of heightened suggestibility. Ancient priests and rulers were the unwitting pioneers of this neuroscience. They used relentless drumming to synchronize the marching of armies, making thousands move as one organism. They used sudden, jarring silences after a crescendo of noise to create a vacuum of attention, making the next spoken word land with the force of a thunderclap. They even manipulated frequency with intuitive genius. The low, resonant thrum of a great horn or the ground-shaking stomp of feet used low-frequency sounds to trigger visceral feelings of intimidation and dread. In contrast, the sharp, piercing cry of a trumpet or the high-pitched ring of a sistrum would snap the crowd to immediate alertness, directing their focus to a new command or a divine pronouncement. Even the reverberation in these spaces played a trick on the mind. A voice that echoes slightly, persisting in the air for a moment longer than natural, is subconsciously perceived as more truthful, more powerful, and more godlike. This is why the prolonged acoustics of a cathedral or an ancient Greek theater were so effective in religious rituals. Prolonged exposure to this curated soundscape, where specific frequencies and rhythms triggered specific emotional responses, could lead entire crowds into states of collective ecstasy and unwavering devotion. The architecture was not just projecting sound, it was programming human response, so we must confront a pressing question. How does this ancient psychology of sonic submission manifest in our modern world? The ominous, low-frequency drone in a horror film soundtrack is designed to make you feel unease. The upbeat, repetitive jingle in a commercial conditions you to feel happy about a product. And the curated soundscape of a digital feed, with its relentless rhythm of notifications and its algorithmically amplified voices, primes you for specific beliefs and behaviors. The tools have evolved from stone to silicon, but the target remains the same: the human brain's deep-seated vulnerability to the power of controlled sound. The cool marble underfoot was more than just a beautiful surface. It was a critical component of the acoustic design. Ancient builders selected every material with the precision of a modern audio engineer, understanding that stone, water, and air were not just elements of construction but the very instruments of influence. They knew that a dense, polished limestone would act as a perfect mirror for sound, reflecting a leader's words with brilliant clarity across a plaza. In contrast, a porous, rough-cut sandstone would absorb those same waves, creating pockets of quiet where private conversations could be muffled and lost. This was not a matter of chance. It was the science of material acoustics applied centuries before the term was coined. Architectural historians studying sites like the Hagia Sophia have noted how its builders mixed marble and mosaic to achieve a specific reverberation time, the duration a sound persists in a space. The hard, curved surfaces of its great dome ensured that a chanted prayer would hang in the air for seconds, blending with the notes that followed to create a heavenly, immersive chorus that felt utterly divine. The choice of materials extended to man-made objects as well. Builders often embedded rows of bronze gongs or large ceramic pots within the walls of theaters and plazas. These vessels were not decorative, they acted as Helmholtz resonators, a principle we still use in speaker design today. They would naturally vibrate and amplify specific, desired frequencies, enriching the sound of a voice or a musical instrument while filtering out dissonant background noise. Water was another masterful tool in their acoustic arsenal. The gentle splash of a central fountain or the steady flow of water through carved channels provided a constant, masking murmur. This engineered white noise served a dual purpose. It created a serene atmosphere while simultaneously drowning out the murmur of dissent or private gossip, ensuring that only the officially amplified voice could rise above the acoustic haze. Even the air itself was part of the design. The vast, open space of a plaza, cleared of obstructions, was an acoustic lens, allowing sound to travel unimpeded by the absorbing surfaces of furniture or tapestries that would fill a domestic space. And on the periphery, builders would often plant lush gardens. The leaves and soft earth of these green spaces acted as natural sound baffles, absorbing the noise from the bustling city beyond and preserving the curated soundscape within the plaza's confines. So we must pause and consider the materials that surround us today. The sound-absorbing panels in a modern office, the echoing tiles in a shopping mall, the specific acoustics of a car interior designed for a premium audio experience. Each one shapes what we hear and how we feel. Are the materials in our own homes and cities creating spaces for open dialogue, or are they, like the ancient stones, quietly funneling our attention toward a predetermined point? A single rope stretched taut between two stakes could define the future path of a sound wave. These ancient builders, armed with nothing more than ropes, weighted plumb bobs, and water levels for finding true flatness, were in fact manipulating geometry with the foresight of a modern physicist. They understood that the shape of a space dictated the behavior of sound within it, and they encoded this knowledge into the very blueprints of their plazas and theaters. The Roman architect Vitruvius, in his 10 books on architecture, laid out precise mathematical formulas for constructing spaces with perfect acoustics. He dictated the ideal angles for sloping seats and the precise proportions between a stage's height and the surrounding walls, all to ensure the voice of the orator would carry with clarity and force, undistorted by echoes or dead spots. The guiding principles were curves like the parabola and the ellipse. A parabolic wall, carefully laid out, acts as a giant collector dish. Sound waves emanating from its focal point strike the curved surface and reflect outward in a parallel, focused beam, projecting a whisper over astonishing distances. Conversely, sound waves arriving from a distant source are gathered by that same curve and concentrated at the focal point, allowing a leader to hear the murmur of the crowd with unnatural clarity. The ellipse with its 2 focal points created a different kind of magic. In a space shaped like a perfect ellipse, a whisper spoken at one focal point would be reflected directly to the other, no matter how far apart they were, creating a secret channel of communication across a vast imperial courtyard. This geometry was often infused with harmonic ratios. The dimensions of a plaza, its length to its width, might be built according to the same perfect musical intervals that govern a harmonious chord. This was not mere superstition. It was an intuitive application of resonance, ensuring the space itself would sympathetically vibrate with and enrich the frequencies of the human voice. The ultimate expression of this geometric genius is the theatre at Epidorus in Greece. Its magnificent semicircular arrangement of limestone seats is not just beautiful, it is a perfect acoustic filter. The stepped rows act as a series of sound diffusers, breaking up and scattering low-frequency crowd murmur that would otherwise create a muddy rumble, while simultaneously reflecting the higher frequencies of the actors' voices with stunning precision toward every one of its 14,000 seats. The result is acoustic perfection, where a coin dropped on the center of the stage can be heard from the very back row. This mastery was often aligned with celestial events, so that on a solstice, the rising sun would illuminate the speaker at the sonic focal point, combining visual and auditory spectacle into an overwhelming experience of power. So we are left to wonder, with all our digital sound processors and sophisticated software, have we forgotten the fundamental geometric truths of sound? Could our modern sports stadiums and public forums be transformed if we looked back to the principles of the parabola and the harmonic ratio, designing not just for sightlines, but for the clear and equitable distribution of the human voice itself? The first ray of sun on the solstice pierced the doorway like a blade of light, striking the high priest standing at the acoustic focal point of the plaza. As the golden beam illuminated him, he began a low chant, and the architecture around him awoke. His voice did not simply travel, it swelled, transformed by the stone into a pervasive resonance that seemed to vibrate from the very air. This was no accident. It was a meticulously staged multisensory spectacle, where light and sound converged to create an experience of pure, manufactured awe. The entire ritual was choreographed around these acoustic hotspots. Processions moved along paths where every footfall and chant would be amplified by surrounding walls. Drums were struck at precise moments, their beats timed to coincide with and be reinforced by the natural reverberation of the space, creating a thunderous, heart-pounding rhythm that felt both immense and inescapable. Anthropologists studying Maya bloodletting ceremonies note that the acoustics of the sacred plazas were integral to the ritual's power. Every gasp of pain from a noble performing self-sacrifice, every resonant chant from the attending priests, was captured and magnified by the stone. This auditory amplification deepened the emotional impact on the gathered crowd, turning a physical act into a shared spiritual trial, a visceral reminder of the cost of maintaining the cosmic order. At the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, the power of sound was even more direct. Priests may have used the natural fissures in the rock and underground chambers, where intoxicating gases seeped from the earth to produce strange, echoing sounds. To a petitioner, these distorted murmurs and booms would have seemed like the disembodied voice of the god Apollo himself, a voice that only the interpreting priests could understand and translate. These resonant rituals served a powerful dual purpose. For the common participant, the shared auditory experience created a profound sense of unity and collective identity, binding them together through a wave of overwhelming emotion. For the ruling elite, it demonstrated their unique access to supernatural forces, proving that the gods themselves spoke through the architecture they controlled. The entire ceremony was a performance designed to make spiritual belief tangible and political authority unquestionable. So we must ask, where do we see these techniques today? Think of the perfectly timed national anthem in a massive sports stadium, where the singer's voice is amplified to a heavenly clarity, uniting thousands in a wave of shared patriotism. Consider the reverberant acoustics of a concert hall, designed to make a single musician's instrument feel like a transcendent force. These modern ceremonies use the same acoustic principles to heighten emotion and loyalty, proving that the ancient marriage of sound and spectacle remains a timeless tool for shaping human hearts and minds. Your own voice feels small and swallowed by the stones. You stand shoulder to shoulder with thousands, yet when you shout a complaint against a new grain tax, the words die in the air just a few feet ahead. They dissolve into a meaningless rumble against the polished limestone. Meanwhile, from the high platform, the emperor's pronouncement rings out with impossible clarity, each syllable landing in your ears as if he were standing right beside you. This was the acoustic inequality of the ancient plaza, a design that did not just amplify authority, but actively engineered the silence of dissent. The builders created sonic dead zones, areas where the complex reflections of sound waves cancelled each other out, turning spirited shouts into muffled, incoherent noise. They used the physics of reverberation itself as a weapon. By tuning a space with specific dimensions and materials, they could ensure that rapid, spontaneous speech, the kind used in a sudden protest, would blur into an indistinct echo, while the slow, measured cadence of official proclamations remained perfectly intelligible. In imperial China, the Forbidden City's vast courtyards were masterclasses in this isolation. Multiple high walls and broad moats did not just provide physical security, they created a series of acoustic buffers. The angry roar of a crowd outside the gates was reduced to a distant, harmless hum by the time it reached the emperor's throne, ensuring his divine deliberations would never be disturbed by the mundane cries of his people. The management of background noise was equally deliberate. Noisy markets and workshops were often placed at a significant distance from ceremonial centers, their chaotic and vibrant sounds kept far from the curated solemnity of power. Within the plaza itself, sanctioned sound was used as a weapon of mass distraction. At the Aztec Templo Mayor, the constant, thunderous beating of massive huhutal drums and the eerie, wailing blast of conch shell trumpets created a relentless wall of sound. This orchestrated cacophony did more than set a ritual mood. It physically overwhelmed the acoustic spectrum, drowning out any individual voice that dared to raise itself in opposition. The very frequencies of sound were filtered. The architecture naturally favored the lower, resonant frequencies of a deep male voice, the timbre of authority, while the higher pitches of a distressed cry or a woman's shout were more easily absorbed and lost. So we must confront a haunting parallel. In our modern world, how are certain voices amplified to a deafening roar while others are acoustically or digitally silenced? Think of the public square where protesters are relegated to designated free speech zones, acoustically isolated from the event they wish to influence. Consider the digital algorithms that shadow ban a user's posts, making their dissenting views invisible to the wider community without a trace. The methods have evolved from stone to code, but the underlying principle remains: the control of a space, whether physical or virtual, to ensure that only the approved narrative is heard clearly. The inequality is no less real for being engineered by invisible architecture. The same psychological forces that shaped ancient plazas now construct our digital world, replacing stone and geometry with code and algorithms. Media theorist Ili Pariser gave this phenomenon a name, the filter bubble, describing how online platforms personalize our information feeds, showing us what we are most likely to engage with while hiding everything else. This digital curation is the modern equivalent of the ancient acoustic bubble, a carefully engineered environment where specific messages are endlessly reinforced and dissenting voices are systematically muted. Just as the parabolic wall of a plaza focused a single voice into a clear beam of authority, The algorithms of a social media feed act as virtual reflectors, amplifying the voices of influencers and trending topics into an inescapable roar. The result is a new kind of polarization where communities form around shared, amplified narratives and lose the ability to even hear the other side. Consider the modern political rally. The venue is chosen not just for its size but for its acoustics. Powerful speaker arrays ensure the candidate's voice reaches every supporter with perfect clarity, while the collective cheers of the crowd are captured and bounced back, creating a feedback loop of affirmation. Outside the venue, the arguments of protesters are reduced to a distant, muffled hum, acoustically isolated just as they were in the Roman Forum. This is not a coincidence. It is the same principle of controlled exposure, translated for the 21st century. Both systems manipulate emotion through relentless repetition. The rhythmic chant of an ancient ritual finds its parallel in the viral meme, the endlessly looping video clip, or the hashtag that dominates a timeline. This repetitive exposure, whether in a stone plaza or a digital feed, bypasses critical thought and embeds the message deep in our emotional core. So how does this awareness empower us? Recognizing that our informational environments are designed, not organic, is the first step toward resistance. When you understand that an ancient priest used reverberation to make a voice seem godlike, you become skeptical of any voice that arrives with supernatural authority. When you see that a social media platform is built to reflect your own beliefs back at you, you can actively seek out the sonic dead zones, the quiet corners of the internet where alternative perspectives still whisper. The architecture has changed, but the goal of shaping human belief through controlled sound and silence remains eerily constant. Silence has its own archaeology. It is not an absence, but a structure waiting to be decoded by those who know how to listen. This is the mission of Archaeoacoustics, a field where archaeologists, physicists, and musicologists collaborate to excavate ancient soundscapes. They arrive at a silent, crumbling ruin with microphones, impulse response meters, and laser scanners. Their goal is audacious: to measure the ghost of the space's original acoustics. An impulse response meter sends a sharp, brief sound, a balloon pop or a starter's pistol, across the stones. The resulting echo, the way the sound decays and reverberates, is captured and analyzed. This data becomes a sonic fingerprint, a blueprint of how the space once manipulated voices, chants, and music. This fingerprint is then fed into sophisticated computer programs that build a precise three-dimensional model of the site as it originally stood. Within this virtual environment, researchers can don headphones and literally walk through the past, hearing with startling clarity how a whisper would have carried from a priest's chamber, or how a drumbeat would have resonated against a long-vanished wall. Pioneering researcher Stephen Waller applied this thinking to ancient rock art sites. He noticed that many paintings of hoofed animals were located in places that produced powerful echoes of stomping feet. His theory suggests that our ancestors did not just choose these locations for their visual appeal, but for their sonic properties, interpreting the echoing booms as the spiritual presence of the herd itself. The evidence is often etched into the very materials. Analysis of floor stones in Greek theaters can show unusual patterns of wear directly in front of the stage, hinting at where generations of listeners sat, their presence subtly altering the acoustic absorption of the space over centuries. Oral histories and written texts provide crucial validation. A myth about a whispering statue, long dismissed as fantasy, might be proven acoustically plausible when tested in the digital model, revealing a hidden layer of technological intention. The ongoing research at Stonehenge offers a compelling case. The massive, hard stone slabs of the circle are not just arranged for the sun, but for sound. Acoustic simulations suggest the structure would have created a reverberant, enclosed environment, perfect for the rhythmic, trance-inducing drumming that may have been central to its rituals. The drum beats would not have simply faded away, they would have persisted, bouncing between the stones to create an overwhelming, immersive sonic experience. So what other secrets might we uncover by listening to the past rather than just looking? Every echo measured, every soundscape reconstructed, peels back another layer of silence, allowing us to hear the ancient world not as a static museum, but as a vibrant, living performance. An ancient architect did not need a digital decibel meter to measure the success of his design. He had a far more direct instrument, his own two hands. A sharp clap in the center of a half-built plaza would tell him everything. The way the sound snapped back from a curved wall or died softly against a rough one was all the data he required. This was the essence of the builder's toolkit, a collection of simple, brilliant tools that turned intuition into measurable acoustic reality. The most fundamental of these was the chord stretcher. 2 stakes and a tightly drawn rope could define a perfectly straight line, the foundation for any flat, sound-reflecting wall. To ensure true level, they used water-filled trenches, understanding that water always finds its own level, creating a flawless horizontal reference across vast distances. But their genius truly shone in their methods for testing sound itself. Roman engineers, as described by Vitruvius, would sometimes use smoke. By lighting a small fire and observing how the smoke drifted through a theater's passageways, they could visualize the air currents that carried sound, identifying drafts that would steal a performer's voice or stagnant zones where words would go to die. They even grasped the principle of resonance. A builder might suspend a stone on a long cord, creating a pendulum. By swinging it near a wall and finding the specific length where the stone seemed to vibrate in sympathy, he could identify the structure's resonant frequency, the note it was naturally tuned to amplify. Archaeological finds suggest they worked through problems in miniature. Excavations have uncovered small, carefully made clay models of plazas and theaters. These were not mere decorations, they were acoustic prototypes. A builder could whisper into one end of the tiny model and have an assistant listen at the other, testing reflection paths and focal points before a single ton of stone was quarried. The most critical tool, however, was a distributed network of human ears. Teams of apprentices would be stationed throughout a space during construction, calling out reports on clarity and volume back to the master architect at the center. This real-time human feedback loop allowed for minute adjustments to the angle of a step or the texture of a surface, fine-tuning the soundscape with living precision. And they built resonance directly into their structures. Roman theaters often had bronze vessels, carefully tuned to specific musical notes, embedded in the cavities beneath the seats. These acted as Helmholtz resonators, vibrating sympathetically with the voices and instruments on stage, enriching the sound and giving it a supernatural presence and warmth. So we must ask, in an age of supercomputers and digital modeling, what have we forgotten about this hands-on ingenuity? The ancient builder's toolkit was a testament to deep observation, using the fundamental laws of physics as their guide. Their solutions were elegant, sustainable, and profoundly effective. Perhaps our own modern innovations in acoustic design could learn from this low-tech wisdom, reminding us that the most powerful tools are often those that connect us most directly to the physical world we are trying to shape. The myth of Echo is a story written in sound itself. A talkative nymph punished by the goddess Hera, Echo was cursed to never speak first and only to repeat the last words spoken to her. When her love for Narcissus went unrequited, she faded away from sorrow until nothing was left but her voice, forever repeating in lonely places. This is more than a simple fable. It is a profound attempt to explain a real and once mysterious acoustic phenomenon. The ancients heard their own words thrown back at them from canyon walls and temple corridors, and they wove a beautiful, tragic explanation. The voice with no body had to be a spirit. Across the world, cultures did the same. The Quechua people of the Andes believed the powerful echoes bouncing between mountain peaks were the voices of their ancestors, the Apus, speaking from the spirit world. In Norse sagas, the strange, delayed echoes in deep fjords were attributed to trolls, a terrifying explanation that naturally discouraged exploration into dangerous, uncharted territory. These legends were not mere folklore. They were the operating system for a pre-scientific world, providing a framework for experiences that defied simple explanation. And this framework was expertly co-opted by those in power. A priest standing at the focal point of a stone plaza could make his voice project with inhuman force. To the crowd, this was not a trick of geometry. It was a divine blessing, proof that the gods were amplifying their chosen speaker. Conversely, when a whisper seemed to travel through a solid wall, it was seen as a spirit's warning or a god's approval. The mythology served a crucial political function. It sanctified the human-made soundscape. It transformed an engineered advantage into a supernatural mandate, making the architecture of control feel like the architecture of heaven itself. The very stones were deemed sacred because they spoke, and since the ruler controlled the stones, he therefore controlled the divine conversation. So we are left to ponder, what are our modern echoes? When a cryptic error message appears on your screen from a system you do not understand, do you not feel a flicker of superstition? When an algorithm serves you a perfectly timed ad for something you only just whispered near your phone, does it not feel like digital magic? We have replaced nymphs and trolls with ghosts in the machine, but the human impulse to mythologize the technology we cannot see remains a powerful force in shaping what we believe. The stone for a single whispering gallery did not fall from the sky. It was torn from the earth, a brutal and costly endeavor demanding the labor of thousands. To build an acoustic plaza required an economic engine capable of quarrying and transporting thousands of tons of granite or limestone, all for the explicit purpose of mastering sound. This was not a decorative afterthought. It was a central pillar of state power, a capital investment in social control. The Mayan city of Tikal offers stark evidence. Its great plaza, a vast, open space flanked by towering temples and palaces, is a masterpiece of acoustic engineering. The hard limestone surfaces and precise spatial proportions ensured that pronouncements from the North Acropolis would carry with authority, directly correlating acoustic power with the seat of political authority. The resources required were staggering, quarrying the stone with stone tools, transporting it miles without the wheel, and employing skilled artisans to shape and polish every surface represented a massive diversion of a kingdom's wealth and manpower. Why would a society on the brink of survival pour so much into shaping silence? The answer lies in the returns on that investment. A stable, orderly society was a productive one. A plaza where trade could be conducted without the chaos of competing shouts facilitated commerce and tax collection. A ritual space that drew pilgrims with awe-inspiring sonic spectacles generated revenue and solidified cultural influence. The Roman Empire institutionalized this thinking. Their extensive public works programs treated acoustic design as a standard feature, not a luxury. The forums and amphitheaters built from Britain to Syria were not just symbols of Roman might. They were functional tools for projecting the Roman voice and absorbing the din of potential unrest. This construction was often funded by the spoils of conquest and built by slave labor, a grim calculation where human lives were the currency for purchasing sonic domination. And the costs did not end with construction. Maintaining these acoustic properties required constant upkeep. Weathered stones that lost their polish would absorb sound, and encroaching vegetation would muffle reflections, demanding a permanent class of custodians to preserve the space's controlling power. So we must confront the economic reality of control. The price of this ancient silence was paid in human toil and national treasure. What then are the modern equivalents? The vast server farms that host our digital echo chambers consume immense energy and resources. The sophisticated algorithms that curate our information streams represent billions in research and development. These are the new quarries and the new armies of laborers, all dedicated to shaping what we hear. The question of who bears this cost and who reaps the reward of a more controlled and cohesive populace remains as urgent today as it was in the limestone plazas of the ancient world. The roar of an advancing army was not just a noise, it was a calculated weapon, and the ancient plaza was its ultimate amplifier. When an enemy force was funneled into a ceremonial square, they entered an acoustic kill zone. The rhythmic, earth-shaking pounding of war drums, the piercing blasts of horns, and the synchronized shouts of thousands of soldiers would not simply wash over them. The surrounding walls captured this terrifying symphony, reflecting and concentrating it into an unbearable, disorienting wave of sound that could shatter morale and break formations before a single spear was thrown. This was acoustic warfare, where sound itself became a tool of conquest. Fortress designers applied the same principles in reverse. The high, curved walls of a castle gatehouse were not just for deflecting arrows, they acted as giant ears. A guard's whisper spoken against the inner surface of a wall could be heard by a comrade dozens of feet away, allowing silent communication. More importantly, the architecture could amplify the faintest sounds from outside, the distant clink of armor or the muffled tread of approaching feet, giving defenders a crucial sonic early warning system. Historical accounts are filled with these sonic strategies. The biblical story of the Battle of Jericho, where shouts and ram's horn blasts were said to topple the city's walls, may be a powerful metaphor for the use of resonant frequency. If the attackers discovered the specific acoustic signature that made the fortifications vibrate, their coordinated sounds could theoretically amplify those vibrations to a destructive pitch, literally shaking the walls apart. The strategic advantages were multifaceted. A small force could use the echoes of a canyon or plaza to simulate the presence of a vast, encircling army, tricking an enemy into surrender. Commanders used specific drum patterns or horn calls as coded messages that could be heard across a chaotic battlefield, directing troop movements with an invisible hand. Acoustic traps were also deliberately engineered. Narrow entranceways or specially shaped chambers could create unpredictable, swirling echoes that confused and disoriented invading soldiers, making them vulnerable to ambush. Soldiers were trained not just to fight, but to project their voices, to use the environment to make their war cries sound more numerous and demonic. This psychological dimension was paramount. The terror induced by an unpredictable, booming sound from an unseen source could paralyze a unit far more effectively than a visible threat. So we must ask, how is this ancient art of sonic intimidation employed today? The non-lethal long-range acoustic device, or LRAD, used for crowd control, projects a focused beam of excruciatingly loud sound. The relentless drone of unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones, is used to instill fear and psychological fatigue in modern conflicts. The technology has advanced, but the objective remains unchanged: to weaponize sound and use its power to dominate, disorient, and control the human mind. Walk into the hushed grandeur of a modern concert hall, and you are stepping into a direct legacy of those ancient whispering plazas. Contemporary architects now openly study the acoustic blueprints of sites like Epidorus and Chavin de Huantar, using laser scans and acoustic modeling to decode principles that are thousands of years old. This is not a lost art, but a living tradition where the drive to shape sound for human experience connects the builder of a Roman theater with the designer of a contemporary legislative chamber. The Renaissance was a pivotal moment in this story, when architects like Brunelleschi meticulously measured the ruins of Roman amphitheaters, rediscovering the geometric ratios that made a single voice carry. They applied this reclaimed knowledge to the domes of cathedrals and the halls of palaces, ensuring that power and prayer would be heard with perfect clarity. Today, this legacy is evolving into sustainable design, where passive acoustic amplification reduces the need for energy-intensive speaker systems. Architects like Christopher Alexander have championed the concept of acoustic intimacy, the quality of a space that makes conversation feel naturally clear and connected, a principle every ancient builder understood instinctively. Look at the dome of the United States Capitol Rotunda. Its curved form functions exactly like a parabolic wall in an ancient plaza, gathering and focusing sound to make a speaker's words resonate with authority across the vast circular space. The stepped seating in a modern sports stadium is a direct descendant of the Greek theater, using the same geometry to bounce sound clearly up through the tiers of spectators. The Sydney Opera House is perhaps the most iconic modern example. Its soaring white shells not just an aesthetic marvel but a deliberate acoustic choice, channeling and reflecting sound in a way that echoes the grand amphitheaters of the classical world. This ancient knowledge is even being revived in eco-conscious building. Designers are once again specifying resonant, natural materials like stone and polished concrete for their sound-reflecting properties, and integrating water features into urban parks not just for beauty, but to provide a gentle, masking murmur that calms the acoustic chaos of the city. So we are left with a crucial question. Now that we hold this ancient acoustic wisdom, how will we choose to use it? Will we design our new public libraries, our town squares, and our community centers to foster the messy, vibrant, and equitable noise of many voices in dialogue? Or will we unconsciously repeat the old patterns, building spaces that funnel attention toward a single, powerful focal point, creating new stages for the same ancient play of control? The legacy of silence is not just about the past, it is a blueprint for the future of human connection. A stone slab in an Egyptian temple is carved with hieroglyphs that praise the voices of the gods resonating from the wall. For centuries, this was read as pure religious poetry. Today, archaeologists see it as a potential technical manual, a clue that the builders were intentionally designing for acoustic wonder. Deciphering this intent is a form of historical detective work, where the evidence is not a buried artifact, but the shape of silence itself. Since sound leaves no physical skeleton in the ground, researchers must become masters of indirect evidence. They analyze ancient inscriptions for metaphorical language that might describe real acoustic phenomena. They study frescoes and reliefs, looking for depictions of musicians or orators positioned in specific, strategic locations that hint at sound-aware choreography. One of the most telling clues is a structural anomaly. Why is this wall curved when every other is straight? Why is this particular stone polished to a mirror finish while others are left rough? These are the architectural fingerprints of acoustic intent, where patterns on stone floors and steps provide another silent testimony. A path worn unusually smooth in front of a specific niche suggests generations of people gathered there, drawn to a spot where the sound was clearest. The alignment of doorways and corridors is scrutinized not for astronomical events, but for sonic ones, checking if they create a clear path for a voice to travel from a priest's chamber to the public square. To test these hypotheses, archaeologists turn to computational models. They create a precise digital twin of a ruin and then fill it with virtual sound. They can move a virtual speaker to the suspected focal point and measure the acoustic response throughout the space, validating whether a subtle curvature was indeed designed for amplification. This digital work is paired with experimental archaeology, where researchers physically use the site as it was intended. They chant in the chambers, blow replica horns into stone ducts, and measure the results with sensitive microphones. The ongoing debate over Stonehenge is a perfect example. For decades, it was studied primarily as a celestial calendar. But when acoustic models revealed how its massive sarsen stones would have created a reverberant, enclosed environment, perfectly suited for the rhythmic, trance-inducing drumming central to its era, a new dimension of its purpose came to light. We thought it was a silent clock for the sun, but it may have been a great amplifier for the spirit. This decoding process forces a profound question. What other aspects of ancient life have we fundamentally misunderstood because we have been looking at the evidence with silent eyes? How many temples, palaces, and public squares were built not just to be seen, but to be heard, their true power hidden in the lost physics of their sound? If you could design a room where your voice became utterly irresistible, would you build it? This is not a hypothetical question from science fiction, but the real ethical choice faced by the master builders of antiquity. They possessed the power to shape reality itself through sound, and with that power came a profound moral dilemma. Is it right to use environmental design to command belief, to trade individual freedom for the perceived benefit of social order? The ancient world grappled with this constantly. On one hand, a society needs cohesion. The clear, amplified proclamations of law in a Roman forum could create a shared understanding and prevent chaos. But on the other hand, this same tool in the hands of a tyrant becomes a weapon for mass deception, manufacturing consent by making dissent acoustically impossible. This is the thin, crumbling line between stable governance and outright oppression. We see a parallel ethical struggle in our own time. The algorithms that curate our social media feeds function like invisible architects, constructing personalized plazas where certain voices are amplified to a roar while others are silenced. Is this a service that brings us relevant information, or is it a manipulative control of our informational environment, every bit as deliberate as the stonework of Chavin to Huantar? Even the development of non-lethal sonic weapons, like the long-range acoustic device, forces us to ask where the line is between crowd safety and acoustic torture. These modern issues echo the concerns of philosophers like Plato, who famously warned about the power of poetry to sway emotions and bypass reason. He feared the emotional manipulation of art. How much more potent, then, is the manipulation of the very space in which we hear, a manipulation that feels not like art but like nature itself? The builders were not ignorant of this ethical weight. Some cultures clearly chose the path of acoustic dominance, where the ruler's voice was godlike and all others were muffled. But history also shows us counter-movements that sought a degree of acoustic transparency. In the open-air assemblies of Athenian democracy, the design of the Phoenix Hill attempted to allow many citizens to be heard. Yet even there, the natural bowl of the landscape gave skilled orators an advantage, proving that absolute acoustic equality is perhaps an impossible ideal. The central ethical question remains unanswered by the stones. Where do we, as a society, draw the line? When does beneficial sound design, like the clear acoustics in a classroom that help every child hear the teacher, cross over into manipulative control, like an algorithm that only shows you news that confirms your biases. The legacy of the ancient builders challenges us to wield the power of sound not with a desire to control, but with a profound sense of responsibility for the minds and freedoms it will inevitably shape. The stone archway marked more than a boundary, it was an acoustic gate. As you stepped from the bustling street into the royal plaza, the sound of your own footsteps transformed, echoing sharply on the polished stone, as if announcing your entry into a domain where even noise obeyed a different set of rules. This shift was a powerful sensory symbol of sovereignty, a ruler who could command the physics of sound itself, who could design an environment where his voice carried like thunder while a subject's whisper died at their feet, was demonstrating a control that went far beyond mere military force. He was taming the natural world to serve his political will. Political anthropologists see a direct correlation here. The control of a territory's soundscape is often the ultimate expression of ideological control. These plazas were not just spaces for gathering, they were acoustic monuments to power, as deliberate in their auditory impact as a crown is in its visual splendor. Within these domains, specific sounds were acoustically privileged. A royal fanfare, played from a high platform, would be caught and reflected by the surrounding walls, making the brass notes swell to fill the entire square with an inescapable declaration of presence. Conversely, certain noises were strictly prohibited in these sacred or royal areas. The clatter of trade, the arguments of merchants, or the casual laughter of daily life were banished beyond the walls, ensuring the soundscape remained reverent and focused solely on the figure of authority. The Forbidden City in Beijing is a masterclass in this auditory sovereignty. Its vast, nested courtyards, separated by high walls and broad, silent plazas, were designed with materials and layout to create a soundscape of profound isolation. The emperor, seated at the heart of this complex, was insulated from the chaotic noise of the capital. The only sounds that reached him were those that had been formally channeled and approved, a curated auditory reality that physically manifested his absolute remove from the common world. His own pronouncements, however, would be delivered from acoustically amplified halls, their clear, resonant tones projecting his authority back through the chain of courtyards. So we must ask, how do modern nations employ these same principles? A national anthem played before a sporting event is not just a song, it is a collective acoustic ritual that asserts cultural sovereignty. The deliberate sonic branding of a capital city, from the chimes of a clock tower to the official broadcasts of a state media network, functions as a continuous, ambient claim to authority. The urban planning of government districts, with their wide, sound-reflecting avenues and imposing, echoic architecture, creates a modern soundscape of power that any visitor can feel, a direct descendant of the ancient royal plaza. An earthquake might topple a modern building, but it often leaves the ancient plaza standing, its acoustic soul untouched. These spaces were not just built, they were forged to endure with a resilience that has carried their whispered secrets across thousands of years. The Roman aqueducts, for instance, were so massively over-engineered for stability that their echoing archways still function as perfect sound conduits today. This inherent robustness preserved the acoustic features as a happy byproduct. The builders chose materials not for their immediate beauty, but for their permanence. Dense granite and polished limestone do not simply erode, they weather, their surfaces aging in a way that often maintains their sound-reflective properties rather than destroying them. Climate played a crucial role in this preservation. In the arid deserts of Egypt and Peru, the dry air and stable temperatures prevented the frost and moisture that cracks and crumbles softer stone, leaving the sonic geometries of temples and plazas eerily intact. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta offers the most stunning proof. This subterranean labyrinth, carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago, remains one of the world's most potent acoustic chambers. A low voice spoken in its famous oracle room can be heard clearly throughout the entire complex, a resonance that has survived civilizations, climate shifts, and the immense weight of passing millennia. This endurance was not solely a matter of material, but of design philosophy. The ancient engineers built with a margin of safety that modern cost-benefit analysis would never allow. They understood that a wall thick enough to withstand centuries of earthquakes would also, by its sheer mass and stability, preserve the precise angles needed to bounce a sound wave perfectly. Even the adaptive reuse of these sites by later cultures inadvertently protected their acoustic properties. A Roman forum converted into a medieval marketplace retained its sound bowl shape, its sonic power lying dormant under the cobblestones until modern researchers rediscovered it. During restorations at places like the theater of Epidorus, workers made accidental discoveries, finding that replacing a single stone step with an imperfect replica could deaden the famous acoustics, proving how delicately balanced the entire system truly is. So what does this ancient longevity say to our era of disposable construction, where buildings are often designed for a 50-year lifespan? The silent, enduring stones challenge our very definition of progress. They ask us whether we are building for the moment or for the ages, and what voices we hope to have carried forward into the distant, unknowable future. You can feel these acoustic principles for yourself with a simple experiment. Find a curved bowl from your kitchen or stand in the corner of a tiled stairwell. Speak directly toward the curved surface and listen as your voice is gathered and projected forward with a new focus and clarity. This is not magic, it is the basic physics of acoustic reflection, the same principle that ancient builders scaled up to monumental proportions. A curved wall acts like a parabolic reflector, the same shape used in a satellite dish to capture faint signals from space. When sound waves hit this curved surface, they do not scatter randomly, they are reflected and concentrated toward a single focal point. In your kitchen experiment, the focal point is the space directly in front of the bowl where the sound feels most intense. In an ancient plaza, that focal point was the stage for a king or a priest. To explore further, try mapping the echo points in a local park. Stand in an open area and clap your hands once, sharply. Listen for the distinct single echo that bounces back from a distant, flat wall. Now move to a space surrounded by curved surfaces, like a bandshell or a rounded building facade, and clap again. The sound will be different, often richer and more focused, because the curved geometry is shaping the reflection. You can even test material reflectivity at home. Speak toward a hard, smooth wall like brick or concrete, then speak toward a soft, textured surface like a heavy curtain or a bush. The difference in clarity is immediate, demonstrating why ancient builders prized polished stone over rough, absorbent materials. For a more precise measurement, use a smartphone app designed to analyze sound. Clap your hands in your living room, which is full of soft furniture and carpets, and note the short reverberation time. Then do the same in your bathroom, a space typically filled with hard, reflective tiles. The sound will linger much longer, mimicking the acoustics of an ancient stone chamber. Compare your bathroom's reverberation time, perhaps 1 or 2 seconds, to the 6 or 7 second reverberation measured in a grand cathedral, and you begin to appreciate the acoustic goals of the past. To experience a masterclass in this design, visit a modern whispering gallery if you have the chance. St. Paul's Cathedral in London has one, where a whisper spoken against the wall on one side of the dome can be heard perfectly on the opposite side, dozens of feet away. This is not a secret passage, It is the dome's perfect circular shape guiding the sound waves along its curve. So how does this hands-on engagement change your perception of ancient innovation? It transforms abstract concepts into physical reality, allowing you to hear with your own ears the genius of builders who manipulated space and sound long before the invention of electronic amplification. This connection makes the past tangible, revealing that the gap between their world and ours is not so vast when we listen closely. The blueprint for a quieter, more connected city may have been written thousands of years ago. We can now envision urban centers where ancient acoustic wisdom merges with modern technology to create soundscapes that heal rather than control. Imagine a public park where the gentle curves of a bandshell are not just for performances, but are embedded with resonant, recycled materials that naturally amplify a community leader's voice during a town meeting, eliminating the need for noisy, power-hungry speakers. This is the promise of applied archaeoacoustics, a future where the physics of the past solves the problems of the present. Futurists like Dr. Susan Magsound advocate for biophilic design that treats sonic comfort with the same importance as air quality or green space. She argues that our cognitive load is dramatically increased by chaotic noise, and that by consciously designing for acoustic well-being, we can foster greater community health and social cohesion. This philosophy draws direct inspiration from historical precedents, like the Roman use of water features to provide a calming, masking murmur. In the city of tomorrow, this could translate into networks of canals and fountains that soothe the acoustic chaos of traffic, while vertical gardens and green walls act as living sound barriers, absorbing harsh frequencies just as the peripheral gardens of ancient plazas once did. The applications are profoundly practical. Hospitals could feature echo-free zones inspired by the sound-absorbing properties of certain ancient stones, creating quieter wards that significantly improve patient sleep and recovery rates. Classrooms could be shaped with the acoustic clarity of a Greek theater, ensuring every child can hear the teacher's lesson without strain, a simple change that could revolutionize learning outcomes. The integration of smart technology takes this further. Buildings could be fitted with sensitive microphones and processors that listen to the ambient soundscape, then use subtle, passive architectural features to correct it. A public square that becomes too loud with crowd noise might activate a gentle water feature to provide calming background sound, all guided by an algorithm that understands the acoustic principles of the hypogeum. But this powerful fusion of old and new demands a strong ethical framework. The same design that can create an acoustic sanctuary for meditation could be used to create zones of enforced silence where dissent is muffled. We must establish guidelines that prioritize transparency and equitable access, ensuring these tools foster dialogue rather than manipulation. Concept designs for new eco-cities already illustrate this balance, showcasing districts that use topography, native materials, and water flow to manage sound sustainably, creating a tapestry of vibrant social spaces and quiet retreats. So we are left with a pivotal question to ponder. As we build the cities of the future, what role should this ancient wisdom play? Will we choose to create environments that honor every voice, or will we inadvertently construct a new generation of polished stone plazas, beautiful and efficient, but ultimately designed for control? The stones have spoken their final lesson, revealing a history where sound was not just heard, but engineered for power. Our journey through these ancient echo chambers uncovers a timeless truth that the control of a soundscape is a profound lever for social control. From the focused whispers in a Mayan plaza to the disorienting roars of Chavin de Huantar, we have seen how architecture can amplify authority into divinity and muffle dissent into irrelevance. This was the builder's ultimate craft, shaping not only stone but the very nature of public thought. These historical strategies hold up a mirror to our digital age, where algorithms now function as our invisible architects. The curated feeds of social media, the echo chambers of online forums, they all replicate the same ancient dynamic, amplifying certain voices to an inescapable roar while systematically silencing others. The materials have changed from limestone to code, but the goal of manufacturing consensus remains hauntingly familiar. This understanding is our greatest defense. Knowing that a space, whether physical or virtual, can be designed to command belief allows us to step back and question the soundscapes we inhabit. It empowers us to seek out the quiet corners where alternative perspectives whisper, to challenge the monolithic narratives that feel so omnipresent. The legacy of these builders is a cautionary tale and a call to action. Let the echoes of the past remind us to demand spaces, both in our towns and on our screens, that are built for connection over control, for the vibrant noise of many voices in dialogue rather than the imposing silence of a single, amplified truth. If this exploration into the architecture of influence has resonated with you, share your reflections in the comments below. Your voice is part of this vital conversation. And subscribe for more journeys into the hidden patterns of history, because understanding the past is the first step toward building a more conscious future, one where every voice has the chance to be heard.